plans toward American citizens who are in Ukraine and might be there during an invasion? What scenarios would you put American troops to rescue and get Americans out?
There's not. That's a world war. When Americans and Russians start shooting at one another, we're in a very different world than we've ever been in.
Not even on behalf of simply evacuating Americans?
No. How do you do that? How do you even find them?
What do you think of the president's comments? And do you agree that it would be too risky to send in troops to evacuate any remaining Americans?
Well, listen, unfortunately, Biden still has Americans left behind in Afghanistan. So no, it shouldn't be any surprise to anyone watching that President Biden is unable to get Americans out of Ukraine if he still has them behind enemy lines in Afghanistan. I mean, listen, I think it's shameful. That's not how we treat Americans. And in fact, under President Trump, Mike Pompeo, when I worked for him at the State Department, when we first shut down, when the world shut down because of COVID, we had to repatriate 100,000 Americans from around the world, not just from one country, but from around the world. We did that in President Trump's State Department. So it can be done. This administration, unfortunately, is just woefully inept at keeping Americans safe around the world.
And something else I wanted to ask just along the lines of Ukraine is Secretary Blinken has said that we're kind of in this period, this window right now where an invasion could happen at any moment. What would be the ramifications for Americans themselves here in the country for, this potential war to break out between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, let's take a step back first. And one of the biggest problems with how the Biden administration is conducting themselves on the world stage, but especially with the Russians, is they are constantly reactive, right? They're playing, if you think of it in sports terms, they're constantly on defense. They're never on offense. And they are, especially publicly, just sort of waiting for Putin to do something, waiting for him to say something, waiting for him to react. There's a lot of threats. And there's really been no threats coming from the Biden administration about what they will do if Russia invades. But there's been no ability by this administration to get at the forefront of the discussion and to really get on offense, right? And so that I think has been frustrating with me. They not only do that in Russia, they do that around the world. This is one of the reasons, by the way, that President Trump always talked about strengthening NATO and everyone paying their fair share. Because we all have to be in this fight together. And what have we seen? We've seen Germany, we have seen France that have been very, very reluctant to join the United States and Brits as it relates to the common defense. Now, listen, I think it's important for all Americans to know that Ukraine is not a part of NATO. And I don't think anyone, and no responsible legislators right now are advocating to send American troops into Ukraine to get in a fight with Russia. That's not what we should be doing. But this is the type of action that you see from rogue actors and dictators around the world when you have a weak president. And so I don't know what they're going to, do to try and stop this. But what I'm really worried about is the next 3 years, because look at what we've had in year one, right? We handed President Biden and his team 4 peace deals between Israel and Arab states, the first in 26 years, right? That's what we handed with them within 3 months of their administration. They had Hamas attacking Israel. Within 7 months of their administration, Kabul fell to the Taliban. Within a year, Russia has almost 150,000 troops on the border of on the border of Ukraine. So when you look at that, that's just happened in year one. I'm petrified about what can happen for the next 3 years. That's why I'm running for Congress, because I can't wait for another Republican president. I have to get in the fight right now.
I do want to talk about your congressional run, and you brought up President Trump. He endorsed you for your congressional run. Before we do that, I just want to talk about the ongoing genocide in the Xinjiang region of China and the United States' approach to it. On the last day of the Trump administration, the State Department declared that there was a genocide going on there. Yes, that was you and Secretary Pompeo. And I just wanted to, because this is an issue that is so close to your own personal experience with working in the government and for Secretary Pompeo, do you think over the last year, the United States has been aggressive enough in addressing, this ongoing genocide there?
No, not at all. And in fact, Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, said when he came into office that he was going to that Biden was going to lead their foreign policy with human rights. And it's actually been the opposite. It's human rights, I feel like, hasn't even been existent or a part of many of the discussions. The Biden administration has decided that the climate change is what they're going to govern themselves and how they're going to organize themselves. And so they have been willing to trade human rights issues in China for climate change discussions in Iran. They've been willing to trade human rights and that portfolio to try to get Iran back into the JCPOA. So no, I don't see human rights being an issue at all. I think this is incredibly important because as State Department spokesperson, President Trump really empowered Mike Pompeo and I to highlight and to really talk about the ongoing genocide against the Uyghurs, which is a minority Muslim group in the Xinjiang province in China. We were really, I think, some of the most vocal leaders around the world to bring this up. I was constantly doing interviews about it. And you know what? It was really personal for me because at the time in the summer of 2020, whenever we were really sounding the alarm about what was going on, I was pregnant with my daughter. And one of the ways that the Chinese people try to exterminate the Uyghur population is through some of the most horrific things that you could imagine. And that includes forced sterilization of women, forced abortions for women, forcing Uyghur women to marry a Han male so they can sort of try and breed out the Uyghur population. And it was a cause that I cared so much about, but it felt so personal for me, being a leader in the Trump administration and being pregnant with my own daughter. I thought I have to speak out for these women that, I just can't imagine someone forcing those things on me that the Chinese government has forced on those women. So that's why we were so bold and so loud. It's why we declared it a genocide. And I'm really thankful to President Trump and his leadership. Listen, I'm a pro-life mom. So as a pro-life mom, how could I not stand up for women who are being forced by a tyrannical government to have an abortion or being forced by their government to be sterilized?
Absolutely. I wish we had more time because I would love to talk more about this ongoing genocide and what's happening to the Uyghurs. But for another interview, because I do want to talk about your congressional bid. And as I mentioned, President Trump has endorsed you. You brought up how you were the State Department spokeswoman. Can you talk about how your role as the spokeswoman will translate into a potential congressional office?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that question. So listen, if you are going to work for President Trump, you're going to have to be a fighter. And we went through a lot, right? I mean, I not only had to battle the mainstream media every day at the State Department, I had to do it around the world. Because remember, Mike Pompeo and I traveled with, and sometimes alone, but sometimes with President Trump. And we were dealing with the foreign press as well. So for me, it was the privilege of a lifetime to be the face of America First foreign policy because it worked. And we got the policies right. But you have to be a fighter if you work for President Trump, because we were taking arrows from everybody every single day. So I think I earned President Trump's endorsement because he knows what it's like to be in the foxhole with me. And he knows all the many battles that we went through. And you know what? I think it turned me, I think I was always a fighter. I mean, I grew up in a place where I had to put myself through college. I was an Applebee's waitress. I put myself through graduate school as well. I probably had more Pop-Tarts for dinner than one should consume in a lifetime during college and graduate school. But I did all of that, and it really gave me the tenacity and the strength to join the Trump administration. So I was proud to work for him, and I was really an honor of a lifetime to have his endorsement in this congressional district. And the people of Tennessee, my friends and neighbors in the 5th District, will know that I will fight for them as hard as I fought for President Trump in his administration.
And you just brought up the 5th District. What do you think is a couple top priorities for the 5th District and for the people moving forward? Like you said, 3 more years of the Biden administration. How will you sort of be that counterpunch to some of the things that the Biden administration is doing?
Yeah, there's a lot of really key issues. I think one that comes to top of mind is our border. I think that I am uniquely qualified to represent the 5th District on the border because I have experience working with President Trump on securing that border. Obviously our southern border, it's a catastrophe right now what Biden has done. And it's really a national security issue. Our southern border is one that you would see in a failed state, not one that you should see in the world's leading superpower. And of course, one of the things that we had to do in the Trump administration to secure the border was not only to work on building the wall, but to work with Mexico and the Northern Triangle countries, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, to get them to really help us stem the tide of illegal immigration and people going to the border. And so from a foreign policy perspective, that's how Mike Pompeo and I worked with President Trump on the border. And so again, I think I have a unique ability to bring some policy changes and really represent the people of Tennessee in a way that no one else can, because no one else running in this district has worked on the border the way that I have. I also think that jobs, the economy are clearly important to people in Nashville. I mean, listen, this is important to all of us in Tennessee because we are going to the grocery store right now. We saw that inflation was up, what, 7.5% yesterday. So working families are having to make tough choices about filling up their grocery cart or filling up their tank of gas in their car. And if they can even fill up their grocery cart, right? Because you can't find half the things that you need at the grocery store these days. I mean, that's unconscionable. And once again, we're spending like crazy in this administration. Inflation is through the roof, and we keep kicking the can down the road for our children. And I'm just not willing to do that. Obviously, national security is incredibly important for me. I've been doing it my entire life. In addition to working for President Trump, I'm a Navy reservist. I'm an officer in the Navy Reserve. And so I have raised my hand throughout my life to serve my country, and I'm raising it again one more time.